far as the last group, we were, sorry, got a recording. So yeah, we had, what was it, 15 or so applicants that had processed through, and some of them were the retries, meaning it didn't work out for them 6 months ago. And then some of them were able to come back, some weren't. 6 of them made it all the way through. We liked them on the interview, and they moved forward. And then eventually 3 of them had passed by the time the background and the CPAT and everything was done.
Okay.
So it was at 6 was who we liked that we wanted to come in, but 3 of them actually finished and became members and are doing orientation this week.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks for that update.
How do those numbers compare to what we historically had, say, not last year, but 2, 3, 4 years ago? My feeling is that's remarkably low in comparison.
Yes. Yep, absolutely.
To what do you attribute that?
Well, I can only blame COVID so long. I don't know. We did have less applicants. There is a bit of a factor that some who had not probably, I guess it might have been a fair assumption that some of those who did not pass the CPAT might have passed our physical agility. So it might have been a little bit higher on that.
Oh.
But the general applicant pool was lower overall. I'd be making guesses, but I think people not applying in with, due to COVID did slow things down. But,
for the benefit of everybody, do you know off the top of your head what our average was, say, 2 years ago? If you took 2 years, the 3 before that,
yeah.
maybe.
Usually we're bringing on 10 or 12.
Okay.
We had highs of 15 and 16 probably 3 years ago, and it was really strong.
Yes,
Yep.
our intake is maybe half of what it used to be.
Yeah, it's actually less with this cycle. Our normal intake was a little less than half what it used to be. Now this cycle, I don't know, I'd hate to say it's an anomaly, but it's even half of what it was a year ago. So yeah, pretty significant decrease on our intake. I haven't done a formal study on exactly what's happened every 6-month period, but I have the data and I plan to, so I was going to give it a closer look. I wasn't really ready to break down exactly what's happening tonight, but that is something that I'm going to be looking at.
Okay, so anybody else have questions?
I had one other one. On our down at the end, our goal 2 status report and our goal 2, and then again, the 4th bullet there, the operations and training safety team will ensure all relevant district drivers will be qualified on the replacement Type 1 engine currently scheduled for delivery in June 2021. And so I'm assuming we're not going to make that delivery target. So I was wondering if there was any update on what that delivery target might be.
Yeah,
Brent could speak to that.
there you go.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So Lieutenant DeGagne and I and firefighter Ian Stenerson, who works at the OFD shop as well, we will be flying out to Wisconsin on Monday next week to go do our final inspection. And then anything that we find there that needs to be repaired or tweaked or whatever, not repaired, but that doesn't meet our specs, they'll do that there at the factory and then they ship it out here. So I'm hoping that within, I guess is probably mid-August, it'll be out in Washington. From there, it goes to the Pierce dealership in Tacoma, usually for like a week. They put everything into service that they have to do at the dealership, and then we get it in our bay and we'll begin loading everything up. Last time, I believe it took us about a month to get everything onto the last new engine that we got. We've learned some things. We've been able to pre-buy a lot of stuff and we have a big pile of things. So hopefully we can shorten that time frame some. There will need to be some drivers training that I know Chief Klaus is working on because it has a little bit more of a high-tech pump. But the overall truck itself is quite a bit shorter and lighter than our current biggest engine. So there
Right.
will need to be some drive time training and whatnot, but just more
Follow-up
familiar.
question, if I could.
Sure.
Do we have a plan for doing like we did with the last new engine with a ceremony and that kind of thing? Have we thought about that?
It hasn't been discussed yet. I mean, I've thought of some ideas. The original plan is that once it goes into service, its long-term home will be at Station 83.
Right?
The first plan is it'll spend probably like a quarter at Station 81. We're working with the shop. Hopefully we can get air conditioning installed on the 2015 Sabre. So while it's in that shop, we can have it here, get it familiarized with more people, and then move it officially to Station 83. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't do a ceremony or anything at Station 83, even if it's
Right.
not going immediately into service there. So
Yeah, I think an event, whether, regardless of what happens the day after the event, I think an event is a good thing. I thought the last time we did that, it was pretty popular with the staff and everybody, and gave the community and commissioners and all those important people an opportunity to check out the new engine.
yeah, and I think it'd be kind of neat maybe to go do something down also at the harbor where we can like set off the deck gun or something as well. Just because it's the first new engine in that community for, I think,
About 105 years or
oh,
something.
no, they had the spark, but it's been a long while. I mean, we don't buy new engines every day, so
No,
I think it's just to show off more of the community aspect, so that they.
yeah, great idea.
And good photo ops too.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I have a few questions, right, anyhow, on the public relations community service, the number 3 in that, the district continued to experience shortages, transporting for the month. How were we, Chief, did we have any shortages where we had to transport patients because we couldn't get ambulance service?
Yeah, I was actually going to talk about that after our main agenda, but yes, according to Brent, in June anyway, we transported about 8 times.
Okay,
And it's primarily because of not having any of our normal private ambulances available.
okay,
And I guess I'll briefly speak about that. The problem is really 3 major causes right now. One is that the hospitals, and I mean the hospitals in the whole region, are basically full.
mhm,
And there's really slow throughput from the emergency department up to the treatment areas. So emergency rooms are full and there are no empty beds. In fact, last week we got a report at St. Peter's, there are 48 emergency department beds, and they had 50 patients waiting, literally bedded, ready to be admitted to the emergency department. So, I mean, it's a big problem. It isn't only Olympia, it's everywhere in the Puget Sound region, up to the point that for the 4th of July, a plan was made to go literally into a disaster mode where beds would be made available on a disaster basis at all of the regional hospitals. And we were looking at disaster related transport capability and so forth. In fact, the county took a census of all ambulances, private and public, to determine what resources might be available. So fortunately, over the 4th of July weekend, we dodged the bullet and we didn't have to implement that, but it's an ongoing problem.
yeah,
So yes, we have transported several times. I've worked with our operating team on looking at how we can, as best we can, be proactive about it, what sorts of things we might be able to do. Certainly to prepare for it if we see a potentially high traffic load and what we can do as needed. And so we've been getting by, but again, this is not a short-term issue. This is something that's going to last for quite some time. Some of the other problems are that similar to the same problem we're getting for applicants, the ambulance companies are having a hard time getting applicants. So they've got a number of vacancies in their organization. They're not standing up the number of units that they might be able to because of staffing. So, and then, like I mentioned, there's just naturally a lot of patients that are still in all of the hospitals. So it's a combination of things, none of which is easily solved.
So our department does have a license to transport like that, correct?
Yes, we do.
So have you ever considered just staffing an EMT aid car for those purposes and we bill out? I mean, for that, just like, because if it's going to be a struggle, and most of our calls are ALS and BLS, I mean, it's just a suggestion or maybe an idea or whatever, but just permanently staffing an aid car for our area.
Well, we've considered it many times,
Mhm.
and our overall volume really wouldn't drive us to that dedicated staffing like that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we are staffing an aid car very frequently. In fact, if you look at the report, we've been staffing the aid car at 83 far more frequently than we are boosting up to an engine company.
Right,
So,
I see that.
and aid unit 83 generally is the one that ends up transporting when we need them to. But sure, we've looked at that. We've looked at the possibility of billing for it and all of these things, but it just really doesn't pencil out very well. I think our plan of having and striving to get 2 full engine companies and then having those staff jump, as we call it, or coming off of the engine and going onto an aid car if we need to, which is what we're doing, is probably, with our limited staffing, probably the best way to do it. So we're fortunate we don't have a lot of calls. We're not in an urban area,
Right.
but there has been quite a bit of discussion about mutual aid for BLS transport units, and we haven't put our foot into the lake on that one yet, but you know, we're covering what we've got now, but not very well. It's not a great issue, really.
Okay.
When we transport, how long is that taking from when they leave the district to when they're able to get back in service?
Yeah, Brent's been tracking that. He tells me that fortunately, our turnaround time has not been too bad. Obviously, the travel time to the hospital is pretty good when they go to St. Peter's. Part of the problem is companies getting stabbed there waiting to unload their patients to the ER. And there've been crews that have been stuck there 3, 4, maybe even 5 hours before they're relieved. So again, that's another problem that we're working on, and tying up our crew for 5 hours would be disastrous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But
Totally
we haven't faced that yet. Is that correct, Brent?
That's correct. I think the longest we've had a crew there is, well, maybe like 45 minutes or so. It seems like with the fire crews, they try to get them back in service quicker. I don't know if that's true or not. It just seems, from what I've been watching for other agencies, the ambulances, they'll usually hold longer, and then the fire crews, they seem to try to get them back in service quicker. So overall, I think I've been keeping records since 2019, and obviously 2021, we've been doing a lot more transports. And as Chief spoke, I believe from the time we're dispatched to back in service, it's usually less than an hour, which is about the same for our engines if they have to wait for an ambulance and whatnot.
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, and I'll also asterisk that with, it's kind of a small data set. So, I mean, we've maybe done, that's 50 in the last couple of years. So.
Okay. Okay, so then I have some on the facilities. The first one was the automatic door locks. it seems like you guys are having to replace or repair them a lot. So does that, because of the age of them, do we need to look at replacing the doors, or is it just the lock system?
Well, and Brent can add in, basically it's the locks. They're an automated lock. The locks were basically installed when we moved into the building in 1995. So they've gone well beyond their expected life expectancy. The model and the software that supports them and everything is not being supported by the vendor any longer. In fact, the vendor's changed twice since we purchased them. So it's time. We've
Okay.
got about as much life out of them as we possibly can. So I
Do
know,
we know what the cost to replace them would be?
well, that's what Brent's team is working on. We did have that in our long-term plan to replace them.
Okay,
So in our CNR&R, I know Sean and Brent are looking into that.
okay. And then,
Oh, just to follow up on
Yeah.
that, the locks at the North Olympia station were replaced, I believe, in 2015 or so after the merger, so that there would be a common system.
mhm,
If I recall correctly, I think that's how that worked.
Yeah, they were,
Well, those locks are not that old.
well, they are because we scabbed them from Station 81 and other facilities. So
Really?
most of them were reused, yes.
All right, I'm gonna need to go back and look, because I remember having a big project all about that, so.
Well, it was a pain in the butt project, but we may have bought one or two, but I think most of them were reused.
All right,
okay. So then the other thing in facilities, it says something, staff has begun for bid work on exterior improvement of the resident facility. So have you gotten any bids in yet?
No, we're not even, they're working on that as well.
Okay,
The primary focus that we have right now is for that rear deck and getting it, the current one demolished, and then putting something that's can be used for emergency egress from the upper floors, plus have some, not look like a fire escape necessarily,
Right,
but
right.
a smaller deck, something that would be appropriate.
Okay. Okay, and I think my last one is on goals 2, the training center. You guys talked about doing the containers, and I actually had to go out to a client's house on Saturday and happened to go past District 6 and looked and saw behind there that they have a whole training facility done with those containers. I think it would be good if we could maybe arrange to do a tour of those so that we could get an idea of what we're looking at for our training center, because you guys talked about possibly doing a container setup like that. And I think it would be conducive that everybody on the board go and look to see what that is all about, to see if it's something we want to pursue for our training center.
Yeah, we certainly can do that. District 6 has been pretty creative. A lot of departments really have. One of the things that District 6 is using them for is live fire, and I don't necessarily agree that's a good use for that type of equipment.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not sure it's even legal, to be honest with you. Well, there
Yeah.
are air quality issues that I'm not sure District 6 may have looked very closely into, but
Okay.
the intent for us was basically to take some containers and create sort of a multi-level training that we could do on stairs and so forth that would actually be incorporated with the shop building. That was some of the design work that we did initially on phase 3
Mhm,
plan for the facility.
mhm.
After we finished the infrastructure and everything, which we did actually now almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But because of a whole bunch of things, including our friend COVID, we haven't been able to move ahead. And I have made a comment to our new training officer and to our assistant chief that I'm interested in pursuing it again, and they understand. So there really hasn't been much done on it since for about 1.5 years, but we will be re-engaging in on that too.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive when I went past there. I had to take a double take, and they painted them bright red and that. I thought, wow, those are containers. And then I realized it was probably their training facility type thing, because I could see where one of the containers looked burned kind of and that, but
Yeah,
it would be an opportunity for if everybody took a drive out there and just at least just looked at it so that we could get a better scope on what you want to do for our training facility and incorporating those type of things in it. So, okay, that's all I have. Anybody else?
As Chief mentioned, he and I have been going back and forth on several things. There's just one item that I want to highlight of those, and it relates to goal number 1, the first priority one on there. The first bullet that says the board authorized hiring of 3 new career day shift firefighter EMTs in the 4th quarter. I took exception with that. We're aware of the plan to do that, and that the chief is moving forward with the recruiting process, but we haven't actually authorized the hiring. That's something that needs to come later and needs to be done in a public meeting.
Okay, for some reason I thought we did it in the last public meeting.
I thought we did too. I'd have
well,
to-
it wasn't, I guess it wasn't direct authorization. As I mentioned before at that meeting, and what I wrote was incorrect, as Milt said, but we are proceeding on with the process. We've notified everybody. When we stand up and we have a register, that's when I'll come back and ask for formal permission to hire. So,
Okay, okay. Thank you for clarification on that.
Mhm.
Okay, so next one is your draft policy 316.
yes, that's policy 316. When we had a couple of adventures with a couple of our career employees wherein we came across some issues related to workers' compensation, Family Medical Leave Act, Labor and Industries, retirement, and all of these sorts of things that the district has been fortunate enough not to have had to deal with up to this point. And we had to deal at this point. So what I wanted to do was to capture the steps necessary to address disability claims. And so if Heidi and I and Brandon are hit by a bus tomorrow, that the new secretary, chief, and assistant chief will, if we have an event like this, we'll know what to do. So again, this process is basically following statutory process, but that wasn't always easy to understand. It was hard to connect the dots in a number of things. So this was an attempt to provide direction if and when we have an event that an employee is required to have disability compensation. So the other thing I might add is that for career staff, that process really is different between the left retirement system, which is for all the uniform members, including myself, Brandon, and all the bargaining unit members, and Heidi, who is the only member that's in the non-uniform PERS retirement system. That it is slightly different. So, and the policy acknowledges that. One thing that Milt did bring up, which I scratched my head and said, oh yeah, is a process and a policy that we reflect how we manage significant injury that's sustained by a member off duty. So if they're out driving their boat and get hurt or something like that, and it's not a duty related injury, what options does that person have as far as long-term disability? Are they able to in fact return to work, and what the requirements are for doing that? So it's a bit different. It's generally guided by the Americans with Disabilities Act. But again, I think it would be important for us to have that in place. So Dave and I are working on that. And as soon as we get this policy out of the way, we'll begin working on that. I'd like to add also that we're not requiring any action by the board tonight. This is an opportunity for you all to look at it, ask questions, and that my ask will be that next month ask that the board would approve the policy as however it may be amended. So
I guess my only question is in all of these, this pertains to the career staff, correct? This policy?
this is just for career staff, right?
Okay, so does this have to get presented to the union?
The union has already looked at it and approved it at the form that I was sent.
That
to
we've
you.
done?
The document was basically written by Dave and I.
Okay.
So, but yes, the union looked at it, had a few questions. We actually made some changes before we sent it off to y'all to look at. So,
Okay,
yes, the union has looked at it already.
okay, okay. Anybody else? Questions?
I've gone back and forth with Brian on this, and we need to do at least one more iteration. I've got a couple of things that we need to follow up on together. My only general comment is that I personally feel like, and this is going back to the discussions that we had about a year and a half ago with Dave Coleman. This policy has a lot of detail in it that I don't think the board needs to get its head into. And a lot of it is really procedure. And I think we as a board would be doing better if we kept policy at a higher level and had procedure that addressed the more specific legal issues, step-by-step stuff that has to be done.
You lost me on what in here then needs to change.
Well, I guess I'm saying is that most of what's in here is I don't have a problem with, but I think it should be a procedure rather than a policy that the board adopts, because most of it is doing what the law says to do, and so we don't need a policy that replays all of that. It's important. I understand it's important for the staff to have all that in one place so that it's codified and everybody knows what to do. Just that I don't think board policy is the place for that.
One thing we might do then, and since you mentioned that, I've been thinking about is a very vague, overstated policy level document maybe that refers to, and I think you said it, we take care of our employees and follow the law or something similar to that. But maybe it could have two attendant procedures. One would be for career staff, one would be or career staff with a duty related injury, and the other could be career staff with an off-duty related disability of some sort. And then possibly even throwing a third policy or procedure for volunteer staff and have it bundled that way. That would be one option.
Yeah, I would agree with your general comment, Milt. Yeah, the policy could be something to the effect of, the district supports its employees and follows the regulations to do so. The board hereby directs the chief to develop procedures that will implement the requirements of disability leave for career staff, for non-uniform career staff, and for volunteers. I mean, that would be our policy statement.
That's certainly doable, and it's something that I could put together. Maybe what I'll do is then work with Dave, put that third procedure so we can bundle those, at least you're aware of them, and I can develop a more generic policy level statement, and we can look at that next time. If that makes sense to me as well. So
Okay, that makes better sense to me, understanding the difference between a policy and procedures and what they're doing. So
I thought it was a unique opportunity for y'all to have a little glimpse into what Heidi deals with every day. So
yeah,
and that's part of it. That's not all of it, certainly. So
Okay, so the next thing would be procedure, non-securing staging. What's that? I don't.
Oh, yep.
Chief?
Yeah, I'm just writing here. I sent out a updated procedure the other day as a result of some of the work related with our BLS transports and response. As you may or may not know, at the last legislative session, there was a fair amount of reactive legislation as a result of either actual or perceived police intervention in everything. And so, as our legislature's been known to do in the past, produced copious amounts of legislation that may or may not have made sense. And as a result, we have some legislation that was passed, signed by the governor and put into place that literally restricts law enforcement from responding to certain types of calls, primarily those that a crime is not being committed or probably will not be committed. And, but has in the past generated the type of an incident that both of us, both fire and EMS have responded to. Fire and EMS not being typically in and having legal authority to make scene securing actions, has staged in the past, waited for law enforcement to arrive, secure the scene, and let us know that it was safe to enter, which they have done to some degree of success. And I want to talk about that in a few minutes as well. But
Chief,
So-
can I interrupt for a second? Just to make sure I'm clear, my understanding of the laws that the legislature passed did not restrict law enforcement from responding. They did restrict law enforcement from using force on people who are not being arrested.
as I mentioned and responded to you, the end effect is that the legal counsels of all of the law enforcement agencies, including the state, have, by their policy, restricted law enforcement from responding. They're not going to be dispatched, nor will they respond to certain types of calls where a crime isn't being committed. And I'm not an attorney, but we had the sheriff and 3 city police chiefs from Thurston County came to a chiefs meeting and said that very thing. If there isn't a crime being committed, they're not going to be dispatched, nor will they respond.
Right. I understand that's their decision and their interpretation, but that's not, at least as my reading of the law, that's not what it says to do.
Well, it's about 459,000 other attorneys that do. So, and unfortunately, they're the ones that are advising the city councils and the county commissions and everything. But to get down to how it impacts South Bay is the fact that out of all of that bad news, some of the good news is that all of the law enforcement agencies have agreed to proceed on with this in a unified manner. So hopefully how a Lacey police officer or their agency would respond to an event would be the same as Tumwater and Thurston County and everywhere else. That's the good news. The other kind of good news is that all of the fire agencies and Medic One have agreed that we will have a fairly standardized process that we'll follow. So the procedure that was sent out last week is part of the standard response that all of the fire agencies will be directing their staff to do for this type of an event.
Can you give an example of what that scenario would be? Like, is it
Yeah, most of it is behaviorally related issues, like homeless people doing weird things that
okay?
may present a problem. It's drug related. As you know, a number of the drug related things have been decriminalized, whether or not they present a clear and present danger to the family or surrounding people. It's not criminal. So they won't respond to that. There'll be a number of events up to and including suicides, which are technically not a crime, that we could be called for and no law enforcement will respond.
Wow.
What's that?
I said, wow.
Yeah, that's a big wow. And
Because how do
so-
they know it's a suicide or not a suicide? You know, to me, they would have to investigate it.
Well, or a threat to a suicide,
Yeah.
somebody threatening suicide. So in the cities of Olympia and soon to be Lacey, they either have or will be placing behavioral health specialists that will be able to help respond in lieu of law enforcement to help manage the incident and create a safer environment for EMS to respond to. That's not going to happen in outside the cities in the county, which we respond in. So really, there are no resources that we can expect to respond to help us evaluate whether the scene is safe or whether it's something within our capability or that the event would have a potentially harmful environment for our responders. So it's a very conservative procedure, much like the law enforcement procedure, but our first goal really is to protect our people. And that's what we need to do.
So what kind of training are you going to implement to train the staff on how to respond on these calls?
Well, it's understanding the procedure. The officer in charge will need to determine whether the scene is safe. In order to respond, it will require that they stage, evaluate the scene before they enter the scene area. And if the scene cannot be made safe to the officer's satisfaction, we will return and not respond.
Okay.
What could go wrong with any of this?
Yeah, as far as dealing with folks who are, let's say having a bad day, that might pose a threat. I mean, what part of the Medic One ongoing OTEP training also involves how to deal with folks like that. So our EMS folks are getting that kind of training as well, which of course includes all of our shift officers.
You mean clinical behavioral training?
Yeah. And it's I'm not saying it's we're making clinicians out of everybody, but at least we've got some exposure to the concept.
Yes, there has been some training on that, but my opinion is it's not nearly enough to make a logical decision on dealing with a patient. In fact, unless we can determine that the scene's safe, we may not make contact with the patient at all. So personally, I have a real problem in trying to force our responders, our acute medical responders, become clinicians in something that is far beyond what any of us signed up for. So I would tell you there has been some training, and there's no way that it could ever be sufficient to where we could stand alone for that role. That's why we have behavioral health specialists. So again, that's part of what's driving our being conservative on how we respond to this in order to protect our responders.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, clearly it's not a good thing, but and it will develop. Milt asked, well, how does it get resolved? Well, I would tell you in about 3 years when there's been some case history when law enforcement and fire and EMS have been sued by somebody who, a customer that didn't get served and something really bad happens, but I'm not sure that there's any alternative right now.
Wow. Just the governor's way of deregulating the police force?
Well, it wasn't the governor, it was the legislature.
Legislature?
The governor did sign the bill, but it was reactive legislation, good or bad. The Attorney General was directed by the legislation to provide guidance. The Attorney General has not done so yet. They intend to take the full length of time, which is sometime into 2022, I've been told, before they'll provide any guidance to law enforcement statewide, which to me is irresponsible. But I'm just a taxpayer.
Yeah, yeah, we all are. Okay, any more discussion on that?
Well, we'll keep you posted on all this. I mean, this is an incredible potential liability for us, obviously. And again, I don't want our company officers or officers in charge to take any undue responsibility other than ensuring that they protect their crews. So part of it is making sure if these types of events happen, that senior management is immediately notified and we're aware of it. And if we have to bring attorneys or insurance companies or whatever in, but you know, my bottom line is making sure our folks are safe.
I'd like to hear that. Thank you. Okay,
Well,
so
the
any more
concern-
discussion?
Glo,
Yeah.
the concern I have to follow up on that, that I talked with Brian about, is somebody needs to make the public aware of this, what's
Yeah.
going on with this.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where there's the responsibility is divided up between several different agencies.
Mhm.
And so everybody is going to go like this.
Mm. Oh, yeah,
This
yeah.
is small. And to me, it's a very important public policy question. It's highly
Mhm.
politicized, as some of the discussion here has shown. Different opinions on every side. But the bottom line is the public isn't getting the same service that they used to. And I don't think they're getting the service that they should.
Yeah.
And they need to be made aware of it. And I'm not saying that that's our department's responsibility, but we are a piece of this puzzle. And I think it's important that we be talking about it and be talking about it with our peers in other agencies. And somebody's got to solve this problem because it ain't right.
No, it's not. It really puts our guys, our staff and everything at harm's way if they have to make these calls. You know, it's just, that's not what they, like she said, signed up for. But we do need to let the public know somehow on what the legislature approved. And I'm sure it wasn't put in the Daily Olympian. So I don't know if we should put something on our, next door neighbor, or to have the citizens aware that this is what legislature has.
Well, the law was in the Olympian. Actually, there was an article about it a couple of weeks ago. What's not in it is how the law enforcement is reacting to the law, and then how fire is reacting to law enforcement's reaction.
Oh, then I don't get the Olympian.
Things, and so then the public's not aware of those next two steps in the process.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is not everybody reads the Olympian. So like, I don't, so I would have never known unless I was a commissioner.
This is a huge problem statewide. It isn't just our district or the county, but it's a statewide issue. Milt's absolutely correct. The ultimate customer is being left in the dark in a lot of this. Frankly, the fire EMS was until 2 weeks ago when we heard about some of the law enforcement plans for this activity. I mean, literally 2 weeks ago. And I don't remember when the law was passed or took effect, but this whole issue, and we all read the legislation or whatever, but had no idea what ultimately the impacts would be. So it needs to be dealt with at a very high and consistent level. And I don't think anybody has any answers yet. And that's the problem. One thing I did want to add very briefly was that we had, and I mentioned earlier about law enforcement responding and securing the scene and so forth. We had a very significant event a couple weeks ago, or a week or so ago, where we responded into District 3 off of South Bay Road, where there was a party of very young teenage and young adult kids, over 100 of them actually, at a pot party where things got out of hand. It was a fight. 3 people were stabbed, 1 critically, and we got called to it as AutoAid to Lacey, as did Lacey itself in the city of Olympia. Our Engine 81 was the first unit on the scene. They were immediately overwhelmed with what was going on at the scene. Kids bolting away, fights. I mean, literally, it was a riot. And our folks got caught in the middle of it, even though that they had attempted to stage. Actually, they even arrived before any of the law enforcement did. So, as you might guess, I was very concerned about the safety of our people, and we've been working with the battalion chief who was in charge of that, the crew that was involved in that, and this whole affair. And we're working with Lacey and Olympia on a discussion about that. And I know I've asked Brandon and Daryl, who was our battalion chief there, to work with the other departments crews and do an after action discussion. One of the things, and I have talked with the fire chiefs of the other two agencies and expressed my concern, one that we get all of our folks on the same sheet of music on how we respond to and manage these types of scenes. And there were a number of issues that need to be dealt with. The good news is this type of thing doesn't happen very often. The bad news is it's happening more often than it used to. So I can expect that we'll be dealing with something like this again at some point. The other is I was not impressed, again, on law enforcement securing the scene and allegedly allowing our responders to go in and do medical treatment. This is about the fourth critical event that we have had in the past few years that our folks, I believe, were placed in harm's way, even though law enforcement was on the scene and said that the scene was secure. Before we move further to that, I think it's a chief's level discussion that needs to be had with law enforcement. I think it's not just our district. I think it's all the fire chiefs in Thurston County. But really talking about how that kind of a process can better work, especially now since presumably they'll be available because they're not going on all these other calls, on how better to ensure that our folks are safe at the scene. So all of this happened a week or during the last couple of weeks, and it's really been almost overwhelming. But again, we're working with our neighbors to analyze what went on and try to fix so that that type of a thing doesn't happen again. So anyway, it's sort of a related issue. I mean, this is not the sort of thing I'm sure most of our volunteers thought, or our career staff to some degree, thought that they were signing up for. Not a self-pay. So.
Any other comments? So I guess we're on to the secretary's report. Or secretary's minute.
I sent out the minutes from our June 8th meeting. I had no edits to that.
Okay. So we need a motion to approve this one. Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll move we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, approved.
Are there any
And-
questions on the warrants?
I don't have any. No? No questions?
I had a question, and it was about the refrigeration at 83, but I'll follow up separately. I don't want to tie everybody up on that stuff.
I have another element there too. I know this is a monthly expenditure, but I just wanted to be briefed once again on what is my sidewalk. I know that was approved before I came in. Is it an application used by the department?
It's a software system that we use to translate our response data into literally a dashboard to analyze our responses. It talks about our response times and so forth. We have a portion of it that is posted on our website that the public can access about community risk reduction. And we have a portion that talks about more specific response data that is available for all of our members to take a look at, to see how their response and their activities for their shift correspond to the other shifts and so forth. We are in the process, some of that payment was made for building the system and everything. We're nearing the point to where that our current contract is ending. We will be going back to negotiate again with renewal of that contract, but I would expect that the fees would be considerably less than they currently are, is because we're not building the system, we're basically maintaining it. But we had, I believe, a 3-year contract, so that's what that's for.
So that's something I could look into on the website, just kind of browse around, see what's there.
Our website, yeah, the community risk assessment
Okay.
is tabbed onto our website.
Thank you.
Okay, so any more questions on the warrants? If not, we need a motion to approve them.
I'll make a motion that we approve the warrants the way they are.
We get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Right?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, approved. Okay, so I think it's.
I left announcements. I don't have any announcements. I left it blank in case something came up, but I don't have anything to share today.
And commissioner comments, I just wanted to congratulate the graduates. I apologize, I wasn't able to be there because I was working. But congratulations and welcome to the staff, the team.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Commissioner comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So do you think that the August meeting will be in person, or do you think it'll be remote again? Or
I'm thinking it'll be remote again. We are looking at the workplace restrictions that we have. I know the state came out with some guidance, but it didn't necessarily coordinate well with a number of the other things that are going on. So we're being somewhat conservative on this. I'm hoping that our September meeting will be back in place and we'll begin to become more open than we have been. I know we've been getting approached from time to time about folks about open access into the fire stations, but our current policy has been that we're going to continue to be conservative about the labor and industries requirements for our members that actually stay at the fire station. And that just doesn't mesh well with open public meetings yet. So I'm just, we're not having any confusion. I would say that August, and then we'll look at it in August, and hopefully by September, we be back in whatever the new normal is. So.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so review and follow up.
I will be putting together a draft policy level statement about disability management, and then probably modify the draft policy that we sent out as a procedure. I'll also be putting a procedure together regarding off-duty career disabilities, as well as folding the volunteer disability procedure under all of that. So within the next couple of weeks, I'll try to get that out. So keep you posted on the issues that we're having regarding the staging and potential scene harmful environments for our members. I guess the other thing that I didn't mention was that, as you probably know, because you've probably gotten your mailer, is that Medic One will be running their ballot measure on August 3rd for, yeah, there you go. To restore in stages the 50-cent levy rate. And again, the first, as you may have read, the first stage of that will, for if passed in 2022, would be 35 cents, and then it would ratchet up over 5 or 6 years up to 50 cents. And I think that the pamphlet did a nice job of explaining that. So anyway, that's been going on. You may have seen some of the signs out there. So, you know, good luck to those folks, I guess. That's it.
Okay,
All right.
well, then I guess we adjourn at 6:30 exactly.
All right.
Okay,
Have a good evening, you guys. And
You too.
remember to swing by the office at some point to sign stuff
okay,
whenever you can.
okay, will do.
Thank you.
All right,
Bye.
thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Mm-mm-mm.